Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you all know, my name is Kevin Lloyd. I am the founder and CEO of ColumbusBlack.com. I'm excited to be here with you all today or this evening for a very, very special event. As you all know, we've been around for about 15 years and we've been hosting a number of virtual events and activities for our community. Tonight, we come to you with a very special virtual town hall for African-American males and the men of Central Ohio. We are the men of Ubuntu, and we have some special messages that we want to deliver tonight to our community. And we're thanking you in advance for joining us. For those of you that are watching this live, we're gonna ask that you hit the share button because you're gonna wanna make sure that every Black male that you know in Central Ohio hears this message tonight. This is a very important one, and we thank you in advance for joining us. So with that being said, tonight you will be able to find this live streamed on Facebook. It will be live or available, should I say, on YouTube later on this evening as well. And it will be shared through social media. We ask that you, once again, not only share, but during this event tonight, that you actually participate from a community engagement perspective. We would love to hear your thoughts and your perspectives. If you have a question, we will select a few questions from the audience as well, okay? But I believe that the information that will be shared tonight is something that will be very relevant to what you all have experienced and are dealing with, which is why we want you to be fully engaged. Now, with that being said, I have a very special panel of gentlemen that are here with me tonight that represent our community in a number of different ways. I would like to introduce them independently, and then we're gonna go ahead and get into our agenda today. So with that, the first person that we have with us today is John Gregory, who's a community advocate. We have Sharon Hathaway, another community advocate. We have Jewel Woods, who's the founder and clinical director with Male Behavioral Health. We have Brother Cecil Ahad, a community activist. We have Gene Griffin with us, who's a businessman and community activist as well. Adam Troy, community developer. And we have Jerry Saunders, a social activist. And obviously, you all know that I'm a community advocate, should I say, very engaged in the progression of Columbus, Ohio. With that being said, we're gonna go ahead and transition into our agenda tonight. And I'm gonna have it kicked off with our opening statement from Jerry Saunders.
Good evening, everyone. And I wanna thank Kevin Lloyd and ColumbusBlack.com for hosting this event this evening. We are the African-American men of Ubuntu. And we were organized on the February 1st of 2021 during Black History Month to make Black history. Ubuntu can best be described as an African philosophy that places emphasis on being self through others, expressed in the phrase, I am because of who we all are. That's Zulu language. The Ubuntu philosophy articulates such important values as respect, human dignity, compassion, solidarity, and consensus, which demands loyalty to the group. The purpose is to eradicate systemic racism in Franklin County, Ohio. Our immediate goal is a conviction and equitable / appropriate prison time for the murders of George Casey Jr. and Andre Hill. Our short-term goal in 3 to 12 months is the implementation of the United States Department of Justice 21st century policing guidelines in the Columbus Police Department and the Franklin County Sheriff Department. Our long-term goal within 18 to 60 months is to eradicate systemic racism in Franklin County. We've decided to address community policing first, so I want to give you a little history about the history of systemic racism and the connection to community policing. And we're not here for a short-term event. This is long-term, the long haul, and we will be involved until we reach our goals. And we know that this goes back a long ways. So we're looking at a little history here and want to let you know that we've involved some younger folks that will continue on to carry this on as time goes forward. So it starts back in 1793 with the Fugitive Slave Act. And this was the mechanism that was put in place by the United States government to say that Black folks at that time called slaves were the property of white folks at that time called masters. This was enacted in Congress in 1793. That was the first Fugitive Slave Act. It came back again in 1850. And in 1850, what made a difference then is some of the northern states were considered free states. And at that time, the South worked a deal out with the North that if so-called fugitive slaves came up north, that they would capture them and bring them back or send them back to their slave owners. And of course, there was very vicious penalty when that occurred. I won't get into all the details. And a lot of this you guys may already know. But at that time, that's when the police really became active, because one version of history shows that the first police department was 1838 in Boston, Massachusetts. Another version shows that the first police department was 1844, 1845 in New York City. Well, these police, their assignment was to capture these fugitive slaves and bring them back or send them back to their slave owners, to their captors, actually. And so this is when that first started, because they would stop all after African Americans as though they were fugitive slaves to check them. So that terrorizing and harassment started then, and it was under the auspices of the United States government. And so that's what occurred then during that time. Then the other piece under the government was the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment was saying that, you know, that as far as the United States, that slavery was abolished unless you were imprisoned. And so that's the catch. So if you were not in prison, you didn't have to deal with slavery. But if you went to prison, then you worked on chain gangs and you worked for corporations. And that was a major issue at that time. They legalized that chain gang piece in 1844, which is over 20 years before 1863. So they knew what the plan was. So even though freedom was occurred then, that just happened. So then we'll move forward now. Keep in mind, they were arresting Black folks for anything, any trivial matter, whatever the case may be, and that took your freedom. And with a lot more details, but I won't go as involved. We only have an hour. Then come the 14th Amendment. They came in 1868, which said that everybody was free and supposed to have equal protection under the law. But that was followed up in 1877 now by the Jim Crow Act. Now, remember, after the Civil War, there was the Reconstruction period where Black folks were building their communities and businesses and all those. And just think where we would be if those businesses were allowed to still exist, were able to exist all through this time. But another act from Congress came in 1877, which was the Jim Crow law, where any state was able to force legalized racial segregation. And the purpose of that was to marginalization of African Americans. That was Jim Crow. That's 1877. It actually ended in the 1968s, even though we had the civil rights movement in 64 and 65, that still carried on. But since 1850, guys, the police officer's role had been to enforce these inhuman policies and laws by killing African Americans, causing physical harm, mental trauma, economic terrorism, political oppression, and suppression of African Americans. Now, the police were murdering Black people with no consequences, so much that in December the 17th, 1951, Paul Robeson, Walter Patterson, W.E.B. Du Bois, and several other African Americans presented a legal petition to the United Nations for the relief of a crime of the United States government against the Negro people. So many Black folks were being killed in those 40s that they had to take it to the United Nations. It never made it to the floor to be heard because it was suppressed by the leadership of the United States. Then I will fast forward it to 1980, where we have qualified immunity. That was created then. It actually was created in the 60s, 1967, and expanded in the 1980s. And that law is to free public officials, such as police officers, from the fear of frivolous lawsuits for doing their job. It since has morphed into something critics see as a major obstacle to holding police accountable for misconduct. Now, the qualified immunity, although it's a legal document, sometimes I think we get confused about it. But I think that I want to mention this is very important. The qualified immunity does not protect office officials who violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which reasonable person would have known. This is an objective standard, meaning that the standard does not depend on the subjective state of mind of the official, but rather on whether a reasonable person would determine that the relevant conduct violated clearly established laws. We always hear is whether another police officer would do it or not, but it's saying a reasonable person. Therefore, Our immediate goal is for the killers of George Casey Jr. and Andre Hill to be convicted of murder and to serve equitable and appropriate prison time. And so I just gave you a brief history of all of that. We just have a short amount of time. I hope that part of our goal is to educate also, not just to move forward, but we want to educate as we do this. And so Mr. Jewel Woods will come forth, and Mr. Woods talk about impact that this policing has had on the African-American community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. My name, again, is Jewel Woods. I'm the founder and clinical director of Male Behavioral Health. And I've been given the task and opportunity by our leaders to talk about the psychological impact of police violence on Black men in 3 minutes, nonetheless. But notwithstanding that limited time, and I take this opportunity very seriously, rather than talk about the sort of conceptual issues, which I think that Jerry just did a phenomenal job, as any good clinical therapist, I want to try to bring you into the life of what it means to experience some of these things. So I'm going to give an exercise, and I'll apologize in advance for any triggering this might have for anybody. And if anybody feels like this is too uncomfortable, please feel free. Again, this is only 3 minutes to sort of step away and sort of protect yourself. But I'm going to ask you for a moment to maybe think of me, this brother, as your clinician, someone who's earned your trust, someone who asks you for the next minute or so just to quiet your mind. And you might want to quiet your mind by closing your eyes, or you just might want to just, get yourself settled. And once you get yourself settled, once you get your mind a little bit quiet, I want you to put yourself in the perspective of not George Floyd, but the people on the outside watching George Floyd. I want you to take a moment to see the officers beginning to manhandle George Floyd. First thing I want you to pay attention to is the things that you'd be saying in your mind. For the first 20 seconds or 30 seconds, would you be saying, man, that's not right. He ain't doing nothing. After the first minute, would those thoughts start to become verbalized? Would you start saying a little bit louder, man, he's hurt. You're on his neck. Maybe after the fourth minute, would you be yelling, get off of him? He can't breathe. Now I'm going to ask you to turn to the feelings. For the first minute, would you just be frustrated and angry? After the second or third minute, when he's yelling, he can't breathe, or he starts to beg for his mama, will those feelings of anger and frustration then turn to terror of what you're actually witnessing? Now, the last question I want to ask is, after you've paid attention to what you've been saying to yourself and what you've been feeling, here's the question. What would you do to stop it? Now, you can open your eyes if you had those closed. And again, I apologize if I triggered anyone. But the reason why I raised those things, particularly the last question around what would you do, is to really understand the impact of police violence on the mental and emotional health of the Black community and Black men, is not only to deal with powerful feelings and emotions, it's also to deal with this powerful feeling of powerlessness. From a mental health perspective, the reason why this is important is because so often we think about depression and the huge sort of issues related to hope. For men, and any Black men on this call, what we know is one of our major triggers is a feeling of helplessness. And so that's why when it comes to understanding police violence and its impact on Black men, what we know from a mental health perspective is this is largely not rational. It's trans-historical. And I don't mean that there's no basis for it, but and I'll give you an example. You can be a Black man with perfect driving record. You could have your insurance paid up until 2024. But the second the police comes beside you or behind you, that feeling in your gut starts to sink. So it's historical. It has nothing to do with perhaps what you're doing. And the final thing that I'll say in conclusion is, during whatever time that we have and we're interacting with these police, from a historical perspective, as John just, Jerry just sort of laid out so brilliantly, the two things that the police have in terms of state-sponsored potential for violence, the two things that have really impacted our sort of trajectory in this country is the ability to take away our freedom and our life. That's why talking about police violence against African-American communities and Black men in particular is very different from talking about any other sort of violence. I thank you for your time. I hope that did not trigger us too much, but just wanted to give that as an opportunity for us to think about when we think about the impact of this on our community and our men.
Thank you, Brother Woods. With that, we're going to continue on with our agenda, and we're going to go into 21st century policing with Sharon and Jerry.
Good evening, brothers. I want to cover something that's very, very important for us to know. There are the 21st century policing guidelines, 21st century guidelines that we are expecting to be implemented by the police department, and it's broken up into three different stakeholders. There's 15 steps covered in its 21st century guidelines. And there's rules, there's opportunities and roles for everybody to play. Starting first, here are the roles for the local government. Number one, create listening opportunities with the community. Number two, we want to allocate government resources to implementation. Number three, we want to conduct community surveys on attitudes toward policing and publish the results. Number four, we want to define the terms of civilian oversight to meet the community's needs. And number five, we want to recognize and address holistically the root causes of crimes. There's also steps for law enforcement, the next stakeholder group. We want to review and update policies, training, and data collection on use of force and engage community members and police labor unions in the process. Number two, we also want to increase transparency of data, policies, and procedures. Number three, we want to call on the Post Commission to implement all levels of training. Number four, we want to examine hiring practices and ways to involve the community in recruiting. And number five, for law enforcement, we want to ensure that officers have access to the tools they need to keep them safe. That's the law enforcement guidelines. For the communities, here are the guidelines for this group of stakeholders. This is us. We want to engage with the local law enforcement and participate in meetings, surveys, and other activities. We want to participate in problem-solving efforts to reduce crime and improve quality of life. We want to work with local law enforcement to ensure crime-reducing resources and tactics are being deployed that mitigate unintended consequences. Number four, we want to call on state legislators to ensure that the legal framework does not impede accountability for law enforcement. And number five, we want to review school policies and practices and advocate for early intervention strategies that minimize involvement of youth in the criminal justice system. These are all of the 21st century policing guidelines and the 15 steps that we're asking to be implemented. And these three stakeholder groups, law enforcement, local government, communities, we all have a role to play.
And I would like to add to that, this process, these guidelines were created in 2015 under the Obama administration by the Department of Justice and has been known to be very successful in the communities that is being used. We're the 14th largest metropolitan in these United States. Some of these steps have already been taken, and we need to move forward to make sure that the rest of the steps are taken. And the most important thing is that we need to make sure that we stay involved from beginning to end, all the way from the selection of the police chief to the training and everything that is listed on there, which means we're not waiting for people to invite us. We need to make sure that we are assertive and aggressive about going to be included in all of these processes. And then I want to say one other thing. I must apologize to the Goodson family. I've heard that I said the name incorrectly, and it's Casey Goodson Jr. So I apologize for how I pronounced the name earlier. And so from there, we'll move on the agenda.
So with that being said, there's a couple of things that I want to share. First of all, want to welcome Pastor Michael Young, who is joining us as well tonight. So, and then one of the things I want to remind you all of is to please share this, right? This information that is being communicated and conveyed today is critically important to our community and the future of our community. So with that being said, if you're watching this right now, I ask that you hit the share button. Feel free to tag any African-American male as well in that post, okay? And with that being said, we're gonna end up talking about the petition. I'll share that in the chat as well momentarily. But in regards to next steps, we're gonna talk about what that looks like. So we're gonna actually go into an open discussion. First, we have a number of men on this call tonight that have been dealing with quite a bit, and they've been also doing quite a bit in our community. So we're going to open it up for some of the things that they may want to share at this point in time in regards to how critically important this step is and why we've come together and actually said enough is enough. So with that being said, I will open it up to any of the brothers that would like to get us kicked off. Here we go. Brother Troy, I believe you have unmuted.
I have, man. I am happy to jump in, as I have diligently tried to be an active listener tonight. And let me just say, man, Brother Woods, I thank God for the gift of your intellect and your experience to this body. There are a number of folks in your field, man, who we don't have the benefit of spending time with or even learning from unless we're in a transactional relationship with them. And oftentimes, the misinformation or the lack of access to the information that you share helps us or facilitates us staying in the mode of just always be reactionary to a trauma-filled environment and not really understanding why. So I just think the way that you underscored the context of what we're talking about now to help us understand better the history and where we're trying to go with this, man, I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly. And I'm hopeful that there are a number of young brothers who are listening as well tonight, you guys. The important thing is, how do we go upstream to really get underneath the root cause, not only behind how we're reacting, but also the root cause in terms of how many inside the police department react to us on a surface level. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, man, didn't want to blow by it. And so thank you for your gift to the body.
Yeah, Brother Kevin.
You are there. Yes, Brother Aha, we can hear you.
Yes. And just in case if anybody and everybody is wondering out there on what are we going to be doing in between the short-term and long-term goals that Mr. Saunders spoke about. And so we want you to know that we are Ubuntu. You are Ubuntu, which is being self through others. So we all are Ubuntu. So we know it's not gonna go away tomorrow or in a few days. It's gonna take time. But and while we're working on that, all the way up through the process of the core, we want you to know, which is being self through a system. We're gonna be involved in every aspect of policing, how things are handled from this point on in this city, and dealing with the public and dealing with how our people are treated and dealing with police brutality and dealing with people getting shot and just all the other things, bringing the community together, how the public officials have been used to dealing with our community and people in it for so long. And we want to be that group of Black men to finally stand up and be involved in every aspect of decisions that's made in this city, pretty much. And we ask you to join us by signing the letter and getting more involved in this movement.
Thank you, Brother Ahad. Brother Griffin, would you like to add?
Yeah, first off, I want to thank you for hosting this and giving us a forum to be able to let the community know what we're doing and what we're about and what we're trying to accomplish. And, I think Jerry elegantly kind of laid out the history of it. But I think it's important that we all realize that we're going to succeed together. And this isn't about hatred or anything like that. This is about self-preservation. And it's about us working together as a team to show the younger generation that those who came before us fought for equality and fought for, and it's on us right now to show leadership to our city and show leadership to our young people. I really think it's critical that others sign the letter and others get involved, because it's going to take the effort of all of us to make it better. It's going to make Central Ohio a better city and a better community. So I really encourage everyone to take a look at the letter and sign the letter.
Thank you, Brother Griffin. Pastor Young, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, first, just want to say this is a phenomenal discussion, and just always appreciative of platforms and opportunities where I can come and I can, as Brother Troy said, be a listener and a learner. So just grateful for the information, education that's taking place tonight. Also just want to commend the fact that it's multi-generational on this call and in this movement. I think that's incredibly important. I just look at those who have gone before us, and even the work that people on this call have done. And it's been long, it's been arduous, but it's been effective. And, even as the scripture says, one man plant, another man waters, but God gives the increase. And there's been some who have planted, there's been others like myself, watered other people's seeds. And we're believing that God is going to give increase in this particular space. And I think we've already seen a shifting in the climate. And I think it's a new day, not just in Columbus, not just in Central Ohio, but I think this is a domino effect that could take place across the nation. So, man, just grateful for the incredible work you all are doing.
And thank you for sharing as well.
Evan?
Brother,
Yes.
yeah, I was going to say,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Gregory had anything to share before we move on to the next phase of the agenda.
No, I think that what I would say is that for those people who are tuned in, I think what you were witnessing, and Jerry said that we decided to start this in February, Black History Month, because we was trying to make history for this city and county. And this is an opportunity when you look at the diversity of the panel. What we have decided, it was enough that we were going to be divided, that we were going to join together in a collaborative effort, and we were not going to be episodic. We're not starting this for it to go away. And so you should know out there that we are committed to the long haul, to the marathon, to the win. And so we're here with you. We need each person that's listening to go sign the petition for the purpose of signing the letter. And then you go and do your part. Get somebody else to go sign the letter. And then get somebody else. Call 10 friends and ask 10 friends to go to the website and sign the petition. Because it's only if we work together, we will win. The Bible says if two can slew 10,000, so we need more than two. We need all of us to slew the giant that's before us.
Yeah, Brother Kevin, I just wanted to underscore John's point, because most people don't know. When we first met, guys, what was our initial goal for names on that petition?
Just a second. 40?
40 brothers, right?
Yes.
And what's the numbers to date?
We got about 400 online. I think we got about 800 on paper. I don't know, Sharon or John would know more about that number on paper, but I know it's quite a bit, like quite a few on paper.
We have about a total of 1,000 signatures.
Beautiful.
Okay.
That's what I figured, John. So the point is that I don't want anybody who's listening to us thinking that this is a clarion call to necessarily beg you to get on board. Man, inside of 3 weeks, essentially, we went from a goal of 40 to almost 1,000. And so at some point in time, people got to stop talking about it and being about it. And to Reverend Young's point, we're already seeing evidence of that. So I'm just hopeful that this moment in time right here will continue to spur that level of engagement. But I'm really proud of how Columbus has responded. Absolutely. And that's men and women who are signing that petition, y'all. Men and women who are signing that petition. So stay encouraged.
I also want to echo something Adam just said. Jerry and I are part of a group of African-American men here in Central Ohio, and we have brothers that are around the country, C6. In my hometown, one of the brothers there, and we shared the letter with him, and it's Rochester, New York. And him and I had a discussion about how the parallels between the two cities and what was going on there. And he took the letter and he showed it to some of the representatives, and they're looking to model after what we did. So I think we've done something bigger than just Columbus, and we've started a movement.
Planet, there's
really,
others like
the rest of the world, the rest of the country.
Nice.
Now, you're right. If I can echo what Mr. Griffin said, we definitely started a movement across the country. But what I'm really fascinated about in this movement is that it's a collection of the young and the old. You know, this is strength and wisdom joining together. And I would be honest, from a younger perspective, we don't always see it the same way on a lot of occasions. But at this time, it took nothing for us to get on board to be able to push this movement because we're all affected. And I love also the fact that this is an African-American-led event. This is an African-American-led initiative. It's for us, and it's for us for a reason that we have to stand together collectively to be able to address the issues that we see. It's for us to have the things that we want, that we need, but we're not asking for it. We're taking action ourselves.
Exactly. So Jerry,
I just want to remind everybody just to go to the ColumbusEnoughIsEnough.com. I just want to remind us that folks can go there, ColumbusEnoughIsEnough.com, to read the letter, see videos, updates and all, and to sign on there. And some people may feel like if they haven't had any immediate impact in them around themselves or their family, but I would say it's real simple things like if you're a law-abiding citizen and you drive by a patrol car and you tighten up or you're looking in your rearview mirror to make sure they didn't pull out behind you, you need to sign the letter. If you're telling your kids, giving them to be extra careful and extra polite and make sure they got their hands on the steering wheel and tell the police officer whenever they're making the move, you need to sign the letter because those are issues and concerns that are going on. And what we're doing is we appreciate what Black Lives Matter has done, what the mayor is doing, city council and other organizations are doing regarding this matter. But we decided as African-American men that we need to take the leadership and moving forward because us and our families, so it's not just men, we're representing our families also, have been oppressed, suppressed, and oppressed over all these years. So we're just stepping up, and it is not about asking permission or getting anybody's approval, regardless how it goes. And this is just the start. This letter is just a start. So please sign the letter so we'll know that people are supportive. And I'm excited. Like Adam, like you said, we're talking about 40 people. And now we're talking a lot of folks. So I'm excited about it. A lot of good energy.
So Jerry, thank you for sharing that as well and all the comments. Are there any other open discussion comments from anybody else on the panel? We do have a question or two from our audience, as well as some favorable comments. And I'll share a question or two unless there are any other comments.
Then share the questions.
Yeah, so one of them is, what is the movement, right? So I think we have what was coming up next in the agenda, but people want to know what is the movement? And then the second part of that was, what is the petition for? And what are we doing after we sign the petition?
I don't
Go ahead,
want to.
Jerry.
I don't want to sound smart, Ellie, but the petition, the letter's online, and if you read that, it will tell exactly what we're asking of folks, and that is that for the Franklin County Sheriff Department and the Columbus Police Department, for them to implement the 21st century policing guidelines. And we're asking for them to do that immediately, to begin that process immediately. That would include us being involved in a number of things that Jerome had talked about, going down the list, from the recruitment of the police officers to the training of the police officers to the hiring of the police chief. All of those things would just be a start. Now, our ultimate goal is to eradicate systemic racism within Franklin County. So obviously there's other things more involved than just the police department. When we start talking about our education, the politics, all of those things that we have in front of us. But this is just the start. And so we know that we have some pressing issues on there where African-American men have been murdered, and there actually has not been any substantial consequences at this time. And so we're just speaking up about that at this point in time. And this is just a start.
And I think that
we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about next steps.
I do think I want to say this. I think that, so I know for me, sometimes I need stuff to be very basic for me. And so let me say this. This is our step of showing the community that Black men are stepping up to take responsibility for our destination. So the movement is, number one, is that we're starting with this letter to give to the city to say, we're holding you accountable, we're holding ourselves accountable, and we're holding law enforcement accountable. And we want to be a part. We're not going to be on the sideline. We're going to be a part of the discussions. And we're going to hold you to making sure that you bring us to the table, that we be part of the discussions, and we're going to be part of the solutions. You won't be making decisions about the Black community without our voice. So that is really the beginning of this movement, is that we're including ourselves in the discussions about what happens to Black men in this city.
Well said, John. So, and I just want to reinforce this, right? This is the beginning. And I'm seeing some of the movement on social. I'm going to ask everybody once again, do one simple and easy thing right now and hit the share button. Why? Because everyone needs to hear this message and understand why we're doing what we're doing, and that the time is now, right? We've seen enough, we've dealt with enough, and it's time to move forward with some action. So with that being said, hit the share button. Feel free, if you have a question, ask a question. Feel free to comment if you have a comment as well. And now they're saying, so here's what's come up twice. What have the mayor and police chief been saying in response to the petition?
We haven't turned it in yet. That's why we're getting as many signatures as we can before we turn it in. We have, we're trying to get to the end of this month to collect as many signatures as we can, and then we will take the letter and turn it into the prospective people who we want to have it. We will call a press conference. We will ask as many Black men to show up to the press conference. We will then formally give the letter to the officials.
And there you have it. So with that being said, let's see. How do we truly fix the system if it's not designed for us to begin with? In this particular question, they asked, what about the 6th, 13th, 14th Amendment? The Constitution is the fabric of the entire country. It still speaks of Black people as slaves. So would any of the brothers on the panel like to address that in context?
I'll leave that one for Adam or Jerry, the smart people.
Listen, I'll simply respond to that by saying, listen, we came to this country with a deck that wasn't meant for us, man. So unless whoever asked the question is talking about leaving America, we have for the past 400 years taken lemons, man, and made lemonade out of it. And I was simply saying in the same context is that we know that the game is not necessarily designed for us to win. But for 400 something years, man, we've been demonstrating how we can win. The challenge has been, it's been happening in individual pods and individual institutions, individual churches, individual organizations. And Jerry, I'll throw out a term that we often use in Kwanzaa, and that's just Ujima. This has got to really be about collective work and responsibility. And so if we're going to change a system that is not necessarily geared for us, it's going to take all hands on deck.
You know, one of the things that I would add to that, from a mental health perspective, one of the questions that was asked is, you know, what is the movement? Part of the movement from a mental health perspective is to remove some of this feelings of powerlessness that we talked about. That feeling that Jerry talked about, where you get this sort of lump in your throat or in your stomach when the police pull up behind you, from a very living perspective, it would be great not to have that. And part of the history that we had, particularly during the 60s, when folks were very active in fighting against this, is that we had a sense of freedom where we weren't being dictated by these sort of state level sort of violence. So part of the sort of movement, part of the answer, absolutely, which was just shared, is that we've always had to sort of fight. But what has happened recently is that we haven't had the type of mechanisms or movements like this particular avenue is, to actually take back some of this power, so that we don't have to tell our children those things that Jerry talked about, so that we don't have to fear the police when they pull up behind us. From a mental health perspective, those are small things, but those add to the quality of our lives in a very real way. And I think that's worth fighting for.
You got it.
I'm going to ask you, Kevin, to check to see if I'm coming through okay, because on my end.
Yeah, you're coming through just fine, Jerry.
Am I coming through okay?
Yep, you're doing good.
Nope. Okay. All
right. And then
I just want to say we also they spoke about slavery. We got to. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Now, am I okay to go ahead and talk?
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be.
Yeah, I think he's
All
getting.
right, so I was just going to say, we just need to be careful about the language when we start talking about. Okay, a little bit of delay. Oh, wow. Not sure what that is. Okay, let's see how it works now. I just said we want to be careful about the language that we use in terms of slaves and all. That's some language that other folks use. These are human beings that were terrorized in this system, and it was law set up for that to occur and allow for that to occur. Times have changed. There's a movement that's going on not only in this country, as Reverend Young talked about, across this country, but in other countries also. And the time is now. And it's not what other people are thinking, it's what we are thinking, what's in our minds, what type of action steps that we are going to take. And so that's where we are right now. We're not focused on so much what other people are thinking. We know that a game has been run. We know, that's when I explained those things at the beginning. These are laws that were supposed to protect and serve everyone, but we know it's been protecting and served one group of people and law enforcement on another group of people. So all that said, we know, but we're going to move forward. I think the only way to change system, and we've all talked about it, is to get in that system and work that system to change that system. And that's what we got to do. And that's what we're about doing. So that letter is just to start and to introduce us to them. And I'm pretty sure that that the mayor and the commissioner are more than willing to meet with us and to begin to implement these changes. But we got to remember, we got to be responsible to hold everybody accountable. Ourselves first.
Thank you, Jerry. Brother Ahad, I think you were going to say something, Brother Cecil.
Yeah, I just want to echo in on, like what John was saying. I know he was trying to be real careful about what he was saying. And we kind of talked about this earlier, and just plain language. You know, we got to, when we're dealing with our people, we got to really talk plain language to them as well. And it's difficult. So we want our people to know that the people on this panel that I know, the work that we've been doing this work a lot. This is not new. This is not just what we may be introducing is new, but the work that we're doing, what we know, the history, the researching, and all that, it's not new. We've been doing this stuff a long time. And people always, and what we know is, we're going to always get these kind of questions, and we know there's people out there that know just as much as we do. And we actually signed the letter. Trust us that we're making a step to try to move this thing forward. And we need people like them who know if a person can ask a question about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, then they know something. They already know the answer to that. So we ask that person and people like that to just get involved, sign the letter. Everybody can't be out on the ground and solve things or do different things. But sign that letter if you know, and then get with us to try to help us to help fix that, what they're asking about. But we know that these questions are going to come, and there's people out there that's going to try to disrupt us and all that. But we're committed. Like I said, we're in Ubuntu.
There you go. Thank you, Brother Cecil. With that, that was a great segue into a question that was asked, right? So we've already encouraged everyone to sign a petition. We all know that there's power in numbers, right? That's number one. Number two, people are saying, hey, this is a question actually in the chat. How do I get involved to support the movement? So if I'm interested, how do I actually get involved to be more of a part of this?
I think that we have defined involvement. Involvement right now this is phases. Phase one right now is we want as many people as we can to sign the petition. So there's two ways. You can get on the telephone, call up everybody you know, and tell them, go to the website, sign the petition. Or you can come pick up some hard copy signature petitions and go out and get individuals to sign the petitions. Right now, our focus is getting as many as people as we can to sign the petition and supporting the letter that we're going to turn in to the officials.
So, and this part may have been missed earlier, so I want to share this question that was just asked in order to reinforce a part of this effort and what's taking place tied to enough is enough, right? The question is, how do we plan to get involved in getting justice for the police killings of Brother Casey and Brother Hill? So based on what was shared earlier, Jerry, would you like to respond to that particular question to reinforce what you conveyed?
I am saying that is an issue. We're making that demand now, and we will be meeting with the mayor and with the commissioner to address that. If a person is asking if they want to participate in the meeting or something like that, but we got that, we'll report back out to everyone. We'll report back out to everyone on that.
And I think it's very important that you understand what Jerry said.
I don't know if that's a sufficient.
I think it's important that everybody understand what Jerry's saying. We have definite things that we're asking, and we're not moving from what we're asking. And so when we meet with individuals, we're saying this is what we want, this is what we're expecting, and as African-American men with the individuals who signed the letters and our community, we're expecting this to be our outcome.
Awesome. And I think that might be a great segue as we're wrapping up toward our last 10 minutes of the discussion this evening. So Sharon, I think I'm going to be passing it back over to you as we keep getting a few questions about what are we going to do, how are we going to do it. And we talked about short-term and long-term earlier. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, certainly. So, as we talked about the short-term and long-term, making sure that number one, we sign a petition. I just want to make a call to all my young brothers that are out there, Black men, that we get involved and we continue to push this movement, that we find ways to support what is going on and take more advantage of the things that we need to do for ourselves. And one thing that I want us to do is make sure that we understand we all got a role to play. And when we talk about the 21st century policing guidelines, we cannot overlook the responsibility of the community. And that's one thing that we all have to stand on and say, hey, man, what is my role in this? My role in not only holding the police and the governing officials accountable, but how can I hold my community accountable from the actions that I take, from being involved or being a participant. So we have a lot of things that we're going to do right now by getting this letter signed, getting it in front of the governing officials. But in the meantime, as we're making progress, we got work to do that we can do daily.
Thank you, Sharon. Jerry, you have
And
something to add to that?
it's going to pass it on over to John. John, you want to talk about next steps on there?
So everybody, I want everybody to understand that what we have come to do is not to make this a very episodic, meaning we march, we've done that. We write letters, we do that. What we intend to do is do what we know impacts them. And so when we got originally together, we thought about what is it that really impacts the greater community. That's when you go after their pockets. So yeah, steps are, we are going to turn in a letter. We are going to do our part in the part of the piece that we're accountable for in the ask. But the other piece is when we turn this letter in, we are going to do the next thing that has never been done in this community. We are going to file a class action lawsuit against the county, the city, for the purpose of making sure what our brother, who very clearly talked about the mental health aspects of this, is that Black men get compensated for the mental damage that has been done to them because of the things that have happened to Black men in this community. And our expectation is that there be compensation for the purpose of making sure that we get the kind of opportunities to take care of ourselves that has been taken away from us because of the mental damage that has been done to us. So when we file the class action lawsuit, we are going to, over the next several weeks, months, we are going to be looking for individuals who have testimonies, who have experiences, who have felt like their encounter with the police department has caused them irreparable damage. We met with an attorney. The attorneys told us what we need to do. The attorneys that we have met with are excited about this because this hasn't happened, but they really do believe we have a strong case. And so as we have thought about what's going to be impactful, what we know is that no longer are we just going to sit around and talk. We're putting this into action. And as you see this collective group of young men, of seasoned men, of experienced businessmen, experienced therapists, experienced developers, entrepreneurs, we know that this is the right thing for us to do, is that we must hold this community accountable. And we know holding them accountable means we must go where the money is and make sure that we can get money to take care of our community. And Adam, you want to sum this up for us?
Don't y'all love how he just be tossing me the baton to close out after he just said all of that, man? Let me first of all just thank you, Cats, man, for the opportunity again to listen and learn, and Kevin for absolutely being a host with the Moses, man. So we appreciate your continued commitment. John, I would simply say that part of the message we have to make sure, y'all, we send to everybody. And young King Sharon said it best. There is a role for everybody to play. In this stage of our evolution, and Jerry alluded to it, listen, we ain't new to this, man. We true to this, the cats that's on this call. And so this is a time, and y'all have heard me say this before, even in our small groups meetings. This is a marathon. When Jerry gave that history in terms of police departments starting in the 1800s, this game been out there for a long time. This ain't something that somebody just woke up and thought about on yesterday. And so we have to have a mindset that this ain't a sprint, it's a marathon. There's a role for everybody to play. You absolutely need to stay connected. And the first step in staying connected is to sign the petition. And again, I'll close by simply saying this. Y'all know I always say this. This ain't a time for show ponies, man. This is a time for workhorses. I ain't got nothing against show ponies, but right now what we're talking about ain't a spectator sport. You have to be willing to get engaged, get your hands dirty, get dusted up a little bit, because we're speaking on behalf of brothers who are never going to get an opportunity to sit in a room. They're never going to get an opportunity to confront the powers to be to address the sorts of things that John just alluded to. And these are cats who will never probably get an opportunity to sit down with somebody of the caliber of like Brother Woods. And so we're there fighting on behalf of those who are often marginalized and in the shadows and trying to give voice to something that we know has gone on far too long. And so I would just close with simply saying, got to get involved. It's a time for workhorses, not show ponies, y'all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Brother Troy, we appreciate you in those words. We thank Brother John Gregory, Brother Jane Griffin, Brother Jerry Saunders, Brother Cecil Ahad, Pastor Michael Young, Brother Sharon Hathaway, and Brother Jewel Woods for this powerful, not just discussion, but next steps to action. We have talks all the time, but this is action. And the steps are being taken. So once again, I'm going to ask everybody that sees this to hit the share button. Okay, that's the first thing you do. Then you go and you sign that petition, right? Sign the petition. That's how you get involved. That's how you show the support. There are powers in numbers. I'll say it one last time. Stay tuned, right? You'll stay engaged. Once you sign that petition, you'll stay abreast of everything going on. Outside of that, stay tuned to ColumbusBlack.com. That's what we do. We keep you connected to what is going on here in our city, especially critical issues like this one. All right? So follow us, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social, and then remember to go to the website because the website says it all. It says Columbus, enough.com. Thank you all. Have a good night and be blessed.